We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. Find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you. Preview time. Florida, Texas A&M, 3:30 in the Swamp. Plenty to get into right here on this episode, of course. Previewing the game, multiple views, multiple aspects. We'll opponent spotlight. We'll get it going there. Bringing in a guest, of course, to give us a good preview of these Aggies. Robert Behrens of Good Bull Hunting on SB Nation. He'll join us to break down these Texas A&M Aggies. And then, once again, we'll also hear from Alex Shepard, Focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard, like we do every week. He's there on the sideline, taking photos for Gators Breakdown every home game, Florida, Georgia as well. So, certainly looking forward to that conversation with Alex as well. So everybody hit that like button, subscribe to Gators Breakdown as we get right into this big preview of the Texas A&M Aggies. But one more time, just to help us out, like, subscribe, smash that like button on YouTube, subscribe right there on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, if you want to keep that conversation going, a few new members there, Gators Breakdown Plus, getting access to that Discord, keeping the conversation going there. It's been a lively discussion the last few weeks, of course. But just a lot of talk about how big this game is, and everybody kind of looking forward to what this game means right there on that Discord. Also, get your ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown Plus. Link is in the description. Many more aspects to Gators Breakdown Plus, but Discord, ad-free episodes, that's the pool right now during the season. All right, let's get into it. And here we are with Robert Behrens of Good Bull Hunting on SB Nation. Robert, Florida, Texas A&M, you and I were talking right before we recorded. Not either side feeling too confident about this one. Of course, that first game for both teams probably weigh pretty heavy in the fan base's minds, but a big offseason to change for Texas A&M.
And hopefully change for the better. Obviously bringing in, the new coach and Mike Elko, a whole new coaching staff coming along with them. And then about, 20-something transfer players, many of which you're going to see on the field on Saturday. So, it's every bit, the modern college football, like where it's not a 3-year program turnover of trying to get your own guys. It's let's try to get this thing rolling right away. But like you said, a lot of A&M fans with that first loss to Notre Dame, especially seeing what they did in week 2 against Northern Illinois. I think lots of folks having some flashbacks, lots of folks kind of maybe not questioning Mike Elko, but questioning just how far along are we in whatever, that the reboot of this program is going to be. And I think this Saturday is going to go a long way towards telling us that. And you kind of referenced both sides kind of, being almost like mirror images in a lot of ways, just as far as how the season has started, because both of us in week 1, disappointing home losses that really kind of, make you wonder what the season's going to be like. And then both teams with some pretty impressive performances last week, but against FCS teams. So you feel like you really don't know how much of that's going to translate. This Saturday, I would say looms large, is really pretty pivotal for both sides, because whoever wins this is going to say, okay, we're 1-0 in the SEC. We looks like we fixed some things, we saw some growth, and we can build on this moving forward, versus whoever loses is 0-1 in the SEC, is 0-2 versus the FBS so far, and probably has a lot of upset folks here, heading into the meat of the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned a big offseason. Mike Elko comes back, replacing Jimbo Fisher. Of course, he was defensive coordinator under Jimbo Fisher. What does he bring to the job that should be an improvement compared to Jimbo Fisher?
I think the thing that you heard the most often over the offseason was really just a bigger focus on details, on really just the organizational structure of everything as it pertained to the program. And you heard that, not just from outsiders, from beat reporters, but you heard that a lot from players too, of just how different it was. They were being held accountable for when they missed a workout. They had to check in at every single meal. They were expected to eat every meal up there at the complex. So yeah, I think just accountability, organizational structure are the two biggest themes of the offseason that we heard. And then I think you also just hope that schematically you're going to see some improvements. Jimbo's offense was notoriously a little bit stale, and so you bring in Colin Klein from Kansas State, and obviously bring back Mike Elko along with defensive coordinator Jay Bateman, and bring back his defensive scheme that was pretty successful at A&M. And you kind of infuse all that with the talent that is here. Because if there's one thing Jimbo did, he could recruit.
Right.
And no one ever accused this team of not having enough talent to win. And so the hope is that when you take that talent and put it in a system that's more built to succeed in modern college football, that you can have some success.
So you mentioned, of course, game 1, game 2, really hard to know what to expect from this team. We'll get into some specifics, but kind of overall, what have you learned about Texas A&M in the first 2 games?
The biggest surprise, I think, for most A&M fans has been the offensive line and actually performing relatively well, because offensive line was almost unquestionably the weakness of this team the past 2 seasons. And you brought back a lot of experience, but you just didn't know how that was going to work because you're bringing in a new coach, and everyone hoped that we could see improvement, but just like everything in the offseason, until you see it on the field, you just don't exactly know how things are going to play out. But yeah, pass protection has been, I would say pretty darn good. The run blocking was a little bit of it was an issue against Notre Dame, but Notre Dame, if they have a strength, it's in that middle of that defensive line. So that wasn't too much of a shock. So yeah, I would say that's kind of the surprise positive that we've seen. If there's a surprise negative, though, unfortunately, I think you have to point to Connor Wigman, because he was someone that all of us were extremely high on, just based on not only recruiting pedigree, but just what we had seen out of him at A&M so far. And the Notre Dame game, he just flat out looked terrible. He was not accurate. Now, granted, the receivers weren't doing him a lot of favors. They weren't getting separation. There wasn't a lot downfield for him. But even the easy completions, he was making him harder. Now, he certainly looked a lot more in control last week against McNeese. But once again, when you're playing a team like McNeese, that all becomes a lot easier. So I think the proof is in the pudding for, okay, now he's back. He's playing an SEC team. He's playing in a hostile environment in the swamp. Are we going to see him kind of reestablish more of what we thought we were going to see from Wigman coming into the year? Or are we going to see some of those same bad habits from Notre Dame crop back up? And if that's the case, it's going to be a big concern for A&M. And then I would say defensively, overall, the defense was viewed coming into the year as what should be the strength of the team. And I would say so far that's played out. If there is a knock on them, is the run defense has been prone to giving up some long runs. Certainly, like, I wouldn't say they've been porous by any means. They actually have been relatively stout. But if you're giving up 2 and 4 and 3, but then you give up 25 and then you give up 30, that averages out to having some problems. So definitely a little bit more vulnerable on the ground. But through the air, A&M has been pretty rock solid. You and I think even chatted earlier this week online about the A&M pass rush they're not getting sacks, which was a little surprising. But teams so far are averaging 4.9 yards per attempt against A&M. No one's completed a pass longer than 20 yards yet.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that, some of that certainly is the secondary. But I think a lot of that too speaks to what that pass rush is doing. And so far, a lot of teams have just been game planning and saying, okay, we're going to get the ball out quick. We're going to be hitting short passes because we don't think we're going to have that kind of time. Which I was doing some research earlier today, and I found it very interesting looking at the stats because, like I said, A&M having not giving up a single pass of more than 20 yards this year. And then you look at DJ Lagway last week, and nine of his 18 completions were for longer than 20 yards. So that'll be certainly a kind of a something's got to give scenario.
Right. You mentioned Connor Wegman and his disappointing performance. We talked about mirror images of these teams so far, and it's kind of the same way for Graham Mertz in the game versus Miami. You had these quarterbacks that were coming back. You expected steps to be taken by these quarterbacks, and they both disappointed, their fan bases in game one. They're looking for a bounce back. This might just be called bounce back game for this matchup. I think it probably is a good theme to call it bounce back because I think especially both quarterbacks are really looking for that bounce back in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and just as is so often the case, I think as goes the quarterback, kind of goes the rest of the team. And it's just hard to overstate, I feel like, how vital this game is for both programs. A&M certainly in a different situation just as far as program trajectory, because we're only in game 3 of the Mike Elko era. And so I think A&M fans probably have a little bit more patience in the tank at the moment.
Right.
But for this season in particular, certainly this game you really feel like is a pivot point of, if we can win this, maybe we're off to the races. Maybe we can still do something special versus if you lose this one, you start looking at, okay, well, we've still got Mizzou. We've still got LSU. We've got Texas. There's so many other games that it's like, well, if you can't beat this team, then how are you going to beat all these other ones? And so, it's even if at the end of the day, it's only one game out of 12, I feel like for both fan bases, people have so much either optimism or pessimism that's going to just wildly swing just based on what happens on Saturday.
Yeah, we've already saw it a couple weeks ago when Florida lost to Miami. It certainly would continue there. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. Where have you seen Elko's fingerprints on the defense through 2 games?
It's hard to say, just this early, but I mean, the biggest thing that you see with Elko is that they're very multiple. It's for the most part, it's kind of a 4-2-5 defense. But he was actually just speaking in his press conference this week that they do have kind of a jack position, which is almost more of like the more traditional 3-4 defense. Where it's almost like an extra linebacker slash pass rusher. But if anything, A&M, I think the strength of his defense, certainly he always had a lot of defensive line talent, but his background is, he played secondary when he was a player. He was a secondary coach coming up. So I think that really is his bread and butter, is coaching that group. But I think overall, he's just very good at giving you a lot of different looks, giving you a lot of confusing looks. And the biggest thing that I think so many A&M fans looked forward to was he was the king of, I felt like, halftime defensive adjustments in his first stint here. I can't tell you, how many times there was a game where early on, teams are having success. They figured something out. But then you come out in the second half and all of a sudden, it's fixed. And it's like hard to say like how much of that is carrying over now. Once again, only being 2 games in, really only 1 game into playing legit competition. But suffice to say, A&M fans were more than pleased to get him back in the fold. Just because we all so fondly remembered those defenses that really kind of propped up the Jimbo Fisher offense, I would say, for for several years here in College Station.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, look, there's going to be some familiar faces for Gator fans when they take a look at that Texas A&M sideline and on the field too. Jay Bateman, Sean Spencer, part of this Gator defense the last few years or last couple of years under Billy Napier. Scooby Williams, Jaden Hill transferred to Texas A&M as well. What about those familiar faces should Florida fans know now? How's Bateman fitting in? Sean Spencer fitting in? I know Scooby Williams was listed questionable on the availability report, I believe, that came out on Wednesday. So we'll see how much we see of him. But, yeah, Bateman, Spencer, Williams, Hill, what's kind of been the outlook of those guys since they've been in College Station?
I would say, Bateman kind of came in as a little bit of an unknown. I think a lot of fans probably didn't know too much about him until the hire came out. But he and Mike Elko go back a long way. And I think that's where that hire gets made, just because, it's just someone that he is very familiar with, comfortable with, and just, I think, knows that their defensive philosophies align very well. And to be clear, it is a scenario where Elko's on the sideline. He is acting as head coach, and Bateman's up in the press box. He's the one calling the defense.
Okay.
So it's not one of those like coordinator in name only situations. He really is the one calling the shots up there. And then as far as the players, I would say, Scooby, he started in game 1 against Notre Dame, and really, I would say looked pretty darn good. He was making the plays. He was held out last week against McNeese. From what it sounded like, they made it sound like that was more of a precaution, and that if he had needed to play last week, that he probably could have. So certainly with him being listed as questionable this week, you have to think he's probably going to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I would absolutely expect to see him out there. Now they do rotate that second linebacker spot. So even if he is starting, you're still going to see Solomon DeShields. He was a transfer from Pitt, and then also Damian Sanford, probably rotating into those spots as well. And then a similar situation with Jaden Hill. He's playing nickel at A&M. And I think he and Tyreek Chappelle.
Man, don't give me any more.
Tyreek Hill on the brain this week. Yeah.
I don't need another player to worry about.
Yeah. No. Tyreek Chappelle kind of alternating with Jaden Hill at the nickel spot for A&M. But yeah, so certainly both of those guys, I think, expect them to be out there taking snaps against their old team on Saturday.
Did it turn heads when I believe it was Gator linebacker Shamar James said he told his teammate running back Trayon Webb to go kind of search out Scooby Williams and just go run at him? So
yeah, definitely one of those things. Like, I don't know if I would have said it publicly, but
and who knows how much those guys talk,
yeah, and that's the thing, it's like, I mean, because we don't know what relationship those guys have. Like, they could be really close, and that could be like an inside joke that no one gets upset about. But certainly from the fan perspective, everyone loves to take stuff like that and run with it.
For sure. To end this, of course, I know there's been a lot of talk about losers of 10 straight road games, and that, of course, was under the previous staff. Anything Mike Elko has said about the road game issues and him trying to fix? He's talked a little bit about it. Part of it, and this sounds like a small thing, but it kind of became a big to-do amongst the fan base, was Jimbo Fisher, for pretty much his entire tenure here, we left for away games on Thursdays, which almost nobody does. Yeah.
And so generally that's not a big deal. You say, oh, well, whatever works. But when it kept not working, all of a sudden it becomes something where everyone says, look, you can't win on the road, and you're the only one that's leaving a day earlier. And Elko confirmed on Monday. He said, "No, we're leaving 4:30 on Friday." So lots of folks were happy to hear that. But he also kind of talked a little bit more just about just some of the routines, even in the offseason, of just basically the way they coach their players, the way they call their signals, and really just conditioning those guys to succeed in those environments, even when they're not kind of they don't have the comfort of the home stadium, the home crowd. And if anything, it's, for the fans, it would be a huge monkey to get off your back, and probably for the players too, I would imagine. But you do kind of have that hope that it's a new staff, that you can turn that page, and like, goodness gracious, the streak's got to end at some point. Yeah, I think I saw something. Temple's the only team in the country with a longer active road losing streak. So I would love to get our logo off of that graphic as soon as possible. And I will say, like, I was there in 2017, so I know that it's theoretically possible for us to win there. And I will say the last time we won there, it was the final year of that head coach's tenure. So
it was Florida wearing the what we call the ugly swamp green uniforms.
Yeah, those were something.
Felipe Franks running however I don't know how he runs, an 80-yard run, but Florida didn't win the game anyway. But
that was a heck of a play, though.
It was, and. That's another thing, Florida, Texas A&M, not permanent rivals, of course. I think South Carolina was your guys' permanent out of the East before, the conference is what it is now. But still amazing how many times Florida and Texas A&M have had to play each other. Of course, it was the SEC welcomer with Florida and Texas A&M, and Johnny Manziel game, and then 2020 COVID game. Florida had a really good team there. It turns out A&M did as well, and
right.
A late game fumbles. I mean, there's been some drama when these two teams kind of mix it up.
Yeah, it's kind of become a running joke around here that this is the 5th time that we're playing Florida since we joined the SEC, and we have played Georgia and Kentucky combined twice.
Right.
I
mean, Florida fans bring that up too. It's like, why does Georgia never play Texas A&M?
Yeah, and we still like Georgia hasn't come to Kyle Field.
Right.
We haven't gone to Lexington. It's really kind of silly. But I would say, like, for our side, it's still very much viewed as probably like a friendly rivalry. I don't feel like there's a lot of actual animosity between A&M and Florida, and a lot of that's probably the series has been 2-2, so like both sides feel like they've kind of had their success.
I think the only animosity was Dan Mullen's comments after the game. Basically being a packed stadium or whatever.
But I would say, like, I know a ton of people that were going out there to Gainesville, and people were excited about it. And it's just one of those where, even though we have played, now it's going to be the 5th time, we play each other just seldomly enough that it's still like, it's always feels novel. And even though we've been in the conference for over a decade now, it's just one of those things that it's still really cool to go play in the swamp. When I was in college and like growing up, and we were playing in Manhattan, Kansas, and Stillwater, and Ames, Iowa, and all due respect to those schools, but it's a lot different than the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida's not been playing too well at the Swamp, recently. Game against Miami a couple of weeks ago. So, A&M's had their road woes, but Florida not been playing well at home lately either. So, certainly another angle to this game right here. So, hey, Robert, man, I can't thank you enough. Good bull hunting right there for part of SB Nation. Can't thank you enough for hopping on and giving us a preview of these Texas A&M Aggies.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it, and looking forward to Saturday.
Let's continue on with this preview of the Texas A&M Aggies. Their last road win, a 35-14 rout over Missouri, all the way back October 16th, 2021. That means they have lost 10 road games in a row. Of course, under the last staff, under Jimbo Fisher. But, man, that's rough there. That's rough. So, of course, on the road again in the Swamp this weekend. Florida not playing too well at home, of course, in recent games either. So something's got to give here. It's certainly this new look Texas A&M staff looking to change some things and then get a win on the road. So for the Aggies offense, let's start there. It may be a game plan to hide the, to ride the run game and protect quarterback Connor Wigman. I think they're not going to ask to do too much. Not going to ask him to do too much. But, heck, at the same time, the Gator defense must prove they can pressure the quarterback or the Aggies may decide to open it up a bit more. Either way, it's hard to know what we'll see out of Conner Weigman. It's still early in the season, so stats, of course, don't say as much as they will later in the season. It goes for everybody, but that's all we have for this year. Let's go back 2 weeks ago, the big opener versus Notre Dame for the Aggies. And that will tell us more than last week against McNeese. Weigman had a terrible first half versus the Irish. Former 5-star recruit, 7 of 17 in the first half, 2 interceptions. The first interception was an overthrow. The second ball was well behind the receiver. Second half wasn't much better against Notre Dame as Weigman continued to struggle with accuracy issues and just a non-existent downfield passing game. Kind of sounds familiar. Not all of that is on Weigman as the wide receivers struggled to get separation. But at the same time, Weigman just didn't really look comfortable in the pocket. And remember, he was coming back from injury, so a little bit rusty coming back for his first game as well. So that could have played a large part in it. But didn't look comfortable in the pocket, even though there wasn't much consistent pressure from Notre Dame. So Weigman finished that game 12 of 31 for 100 yards, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. But here's the thing, though, before we get kind of carried away and thinking he can do the same things in the swamp. Maybe he does. But Notre Dame's going to lead secondary. And I know what happened against NIU last week and all that. Still, Notre Dame's got one of the best secondaries in the country. Florida don't. So Weigman wasn't really pressured all that much. Still, he still just looked off. And Notre Dame's secondary, to me, had a lot to do with that, especially with the Aggies wide receivers not getting much separation. Only one wide receiver had more than one catch in that game. The same. So, we'll see. We saw for Florida 2 weeks ago, the secondary still have communication issues. Wide open Miami receivers all over the field. And now this Gator secondary, it's got some injury concerns. So, we'll see what that means for Florida. Surely get some guys back. But, Sharif Denson, I'd assume be back. But, how limited, if he's even going to play Devin Moore. We'll see. The injury report this week starts for the Gators going to be a little bit different. So not getting a depth chart, but availability report. So we'll see how much that changes there. But the guys who have been injured, Asa Turner, Devin Moore, of course, Sharif Denson, we'll just have to see what that means. And now Jakeem Jackson last week as well, what that means for the Florida secondary. But maybe Florida gets the version of Weigman where he hurts himself more than the defense does. But of course, can't necessarily rely on that. You don't build a game plan around, well, he might mess up. Weigman did rebound last week versus McNeese. Finished that game with a stat line of 11 of 14. That was about 78%, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also ran 4 times for 39 yards. But after having 2 turnovers against Notre Dame, no turnovers versus McNeese. Looks more comfortable in the pocket, giving the opponent like he should. Junior wide receiver Cyrus Allen been the main target for Weigman early this season. He had 5 passes for 72 yards last week against McNeese. He's caught a pass in 15 consecutive games, so look out for Cyrus Allen there. And the Aggies, new look offensive line. Success in the first couple of weeks probably. Ranked 5th. Look, it's through 2 weeks. We know that. That's a disclaimer here. But still, through 2 weeks, ranks 5th nationally, while leading the SEC with just 4 tackles for loss. So 5th nationally and lead the conference with just giving up 4 tackles for loss on the year. Florida coming off a great performance in that department last week, 12 tackles for loss against Samford. But of course, that was almost non-existent against Miami a couple of weeks ago. Florida's defensive line, look, they're big, but they're not going to play behind the line of scrimmage a lot. It's just we haven't seen that in P4, P5, similar level games, similar level opponents. Of course, they have played better up front. Florida could be hard to move. They got some big guys up front, 325, 350-pound range. Cam Jackson, Des Watson over that. Mekhi Burrow. But the key for A&M, if you watch them execute their pin and pull concepts in the running game, test Florida on the edges with the run game. I think that's what you're going to look for. Florida's played pretty good up the middle, limiting inside runs with Cam Jackson, Dez Watson, Mekhi Burrow flashing. Of course, linebacker play with Pup and Shamar. So I do look for the Aggies to test the edges more, pin pull there, and see what they can get on the edges in this run game. Against Notre Dame, the rushing game kind of hot and cold for the Aggies. They finished with 124 yards, 1 touchdown. Le'Veon Moss showed flashes, but the Aggies will need to get more consistent. They did bounce back with 8.8 yards a rush against McNeese last week. So Moss carrying the group so far with 3 touchdowns on the year. Let's go to the other side of the ball. Let's go to the Aggies defense. I'm going to give a big shout out here to JP Gator on the Gators Breakdown Plus board. I did some good work this week. Certainly glad when Gators Breakdown Plus members get into the weeds of the game a bit too. Got that football no recruiting channel, and it's just pure football strategy in that channel. But he said he went through the Texas A&M and Notre Dame, all 22. And a few notes. Texas A&M on defense, primarily 4-down front structure team. You don't see them getting to 3-down stuff too often on early downs, though they will have a hybrid player standing. Some diagrams there that were showed in the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. Shows what they like to do on 3rd down. In obvious pass situations, they are normally 3-down structure. They present that in a variety of ways, but ultimately it's not clear on who they're bringing. Kind of like Florida with the simulated pressures and the creepers. 3rd down, they run a variety of sims and blitzes. They do a nice job of mixing it up. They got a lot of free runners against Notre Dame. On early downs, you'll see some creepers, sims as well. Not as much as Florida. Preference to bring pressure from the edge, the nickel, linebacker, or safety from the slot, and drop the hybrid, at least in the game against Notre Dame. Would guess against Florida's more compressed sets, they will want to bring the nickel even more. Need to have a plan there. Coverage-wise, they are pretty vanilla. Against Notre Dame, they played a ton of cover 1 variants. Need to be ready with a good game plan to beat man. Nothing too crazy on the back end. Safety flies downhill at the snap when they play middle of field closed coverage. Super aggressive in the run game. Wonder if potential to attack the voided space there with the RPO game. The RPO game is something I'm very interested in. I certainly think that would take off more with the DJ Lagway, but you're also young quarterback trying to make the right decisions there, quick decisions. We'll get into that in just a second. So for me, this Florida offense is in a weird spot. We all know by now the style of offense Billy Napier wants to traditionally run, and that just mainly starts up front. Run blocking been inconsistent so far this year. We all know about pass blocking, the issues there. Look, we heard Billy Napier earlier this week. They're still trying to figure out the best combo up front. It's a big offensive line that can't, pull as well as you'd like, look too slow, too often, getting beat off the ball. Pass blocking a huge concern, of course, in protecting the quarterback. Your guess is as good as mine, the game plan here for Florida. Texas A&M hasn't played the run as well as they'd like to in the first couple of games. But with no passing game at all, McNeese ran for 4.7 a rush last week. And the week before, the Aggies gave up 5.8 yards a carry to Notre Dame. And that was more than the Irish on a per pass basis, with the Irish only getting 5.4 yards per pass. So they got 0.4 more yards running the ball than the Irish than passing the ball. So first 2 opponents haven't had to light it up. They haven't had to rely on the passing game to open up the run game. There's been some success from the run games with Notre Dame and McNeese. For McNeese, still comparatively, only 4.7 yards a rush, but that's okay for McNeese against Texas A&M. Can the Gators get the ground game going? Protect those quarterbacks. Slow down a rush. Texas A&M's defensive line, a force to be reckoned with, of course. We've talked about that matchup for a couple of weeks now, ever since the Miami game, knowing you got another pretty good front here. Got some big boys on the edges, quick, nimble in the middle, However, they have been struggling with a few things, getting in their run fits, staying in their gaps, taking good angles, and sometimes not enough guys in the box. Keep an eye on Shamar Turner, Nick Scourton at tackle. Those guys, they can shoot upfield. Scourton, the transfer from Purdue. But those guys really shoot upfield, cause havoc. Gators offensive line's going to have their hands full trying to keep those guys from busting through the line. Now look at some stats. They don't tell the whole story. Texas A&M only has 1 sack through 2 games, ranking 119th in the country. 1 versus Notre Dame, and I've even seen that one be counted as a tackle for loss, but official stats say 1 sack versus Notre Dame, none last week versus McNeese. Aggies only have 13 tackles for loss, ranking 85th in the country. And Robert Behrens, who we just had a conversation with, did bring up a good point on Twitter that opposing offenses are making sure they get rid of the ball. The first 2 opponents have averaged only 4.9 yards per pass attempt. The sacks may not be there, but teams are absolutely focused on getting the ball out quickly and virtually abandoned the downfield passing game against A&M due to the pass rush threat. To add to this, the availability report came out on Wednesday evening, and pretty noticeable that it listed Trey Wilson, of course, wide receiver for the Gators, as questionable. I saw Swap 24/7's Jacob Rudner's report that he's unlikely to play versus the Aggies. So after that, I reached out to my sources and got back Wilson is doubtful, and Tate Hawkins will have to step up. So pretty big hit to the Gators' passing attack against this Texas A&M defense. So here's the deal with the Aggies defense. They're all about keeping their pass rush lanes, running stunts to squeeze the pocket. For their goal is to make the quarterback throw the ball away because of tight coverage. But for that, it doesn't always lead to sacks or turnovers. My worry, though, is that they just might bulldoze through Florida's offensive line and rack up sacks anyway. It's not a very aggressive defense. So there's going to be a lot of one-on-one battles. I think for Texas A&M, that's what they'll want right now. Not have to bring pressure. They'll start this game, I think, not bringing a whole lot of pressure. See if they can just win the battles up front. Big question is, will Florida take a page from Notre Dame and McNeese's playbook and have to rely on quick passes? But then you're going to have some catch and runs behind that because Notre Dame McNeese still not averaging a whole lot in the passing game. But getting the ball out. I expect Florida to do the same. Hopefully the receivers catch and run ability. If so, Lagway is going to face a whole new ball game compared to last week. He'll need to be lightning fast with his throws, thread some pretty tight needles. And if that's the plan, those Florida receivers better be ready to shake their defenders. Because if the run game doesn't get going, and if they're living in the backfield and pass rush, you're going to have to get the ball out of your hands. Florida receivers are going to have to beat their man off the line and have some yak. Now let's talk about the A&M secondary. Love to play with 2 high safeties. Can switch up to 3 deep coverages on the fly. Could be man or zone. Their main goal is to keep everything in front of them. But they are shuffling a lot of guys on the back 7. So haven't really gelled yet on the back end. They're still figuring out who's supposed to cover who. Sounds a little bit familiar to Florida in some of in that regard. But especially beyond the quarterbacks handling the outside receivers. Good news for Florida. I think, quick throws to the outside and crossing routes could give A&M some fits if the quarterback has time to make the throws. It all boils down to that. Secondary can be taken advantage of. It sounds very similar to Miami a couple of weeks ago. Very, very strong up front. Questions on the back end. Didn't really help Florida all that much a couple of weeks ago. So Florida's lack of pass rush, going back to the other side, that concerns me to affect Webbing consistently. I'm going to wrap it up here in this preview of the game. Prediction coming up, but Florida's lack of pass rush, that really concerns me. We've seen so far this year that for Weigman, seen so far this year that he can help a defense out on his own. But for Florida's defense, you can't bank on that. You don't game plan for that. Now, there's some defenses out there to say, yeah, okay, the quarterback will eventually mess it all up. We'll play bend, don't break. He'll eventually mess it up. And there might be some of that here. But at the same time, we have seen the Florida defense be a get-right game for opposing quarterbacks the last few years. You know, Weigman can win or lose this game for Texas A&M. He's got to improve his play as well. But for this Gator defense, that might be the elixir he's looking for. Looking at the other side for Florida, not sure who will play at quarterback or how much. Makes this a little more difficult to predict. I expect Graham Mertz to start. But no matter who's at quarterback for Florida, Mertz or Lagway, both are going to have to be on point, in rhythm, in the quick passing game. Quick decisions are going to have to be made. And that's where we need to see Lagway where we didn't see him much last week. Faster decisions in tighter windows. And if he's going to play more than a handful of plays, we're going to have to see that from him. Now, if it's just a few plays here or there, all right, maybe we don't need to see that from DJ Lagway. But if he's going to be in there for, you know, a high number, I don't know what the number looks like, but if he's going to be out there for, all right, 20-ish, 25 plays, hopefully more, maybe more, there's going to have to be times where he's going to have to make faster decisions, throw in tighter windows, just because of the raising competition. Now, for Mertz, you know, if we get last season Mertz, that could be enough to win this game as long as the defense shows up. It can be pretty much the story of last season, but we saw how last season ended. So Graham Mertz can play well, and Florida can still lose this game. He can play well, and Florida can be in the game. Defense is going to have to make a late play. But if Mertz plays like he did last year, which we didn't see versus Miami, and the defense plays a good game, Florida will win this game. But we've also seen it. The offense can have a good day erased by the defense. And look, I know a lot of people will go back to the Aggies lost to Notre Dame at home, and then Notre Dame loses to NIU last week, and many will correlate that somehow into this game. Well, for me, personally, I can't get the Miami game out of my head for Florida. I'm in improvement mode for Billy Napier. I'm still not sure the Florida offensive line is, ready to help the offense use the skill players enough to make a difference. If Lagway plays more than I think he will, then I can see Florida squeaking this one out. But without knowing that angle, I'm rolling with Texas A&M, 27-20. I think there are many reasons Florida can win this game, and maybe I'm overreacting to what we saw 2 weeks ago. I like Florida's skill position players, but I feel they're just limited by the offensive line play. And we'll see about quarterback. Florida's offensive line play really affects how I think this game can be played. I think Texas A&M controls the trenches, and they walk out with a touchdown win, 27-20. I'm in improvement mode. I'm in improvement mode. Got really down the Arkansas game last year. I haven't seen much to really dig out of that after what we saw a couple of weeks ago versus Miami. So certainly a game Florida can win. Maybe some ways should win. And we just heard about Texas A&M's road woes. But Florida hasn't been too good at home in recent games either. Can the Swamp really be a difference? What the difference a couple weeks ago? And this whole sense of urgency about Florida as well. Where is that? And I'll go back to what I said after the Miami game. You should have had all the sense of urgency in the world for that game. The back against the wall mentality for that game. And you came out flat. Why should I believe Florida's got that prove the world wrong, back against the wall mentality now? If you didn't have it then, why should I believe you have it now? Why should I believe that should make a difference right now? So maybe I'm grading too harsh right now. But the whole blind belief, the hope, the faith, no, I'm in improvement mode. Teams with a little more talent, maybe like Texas A&M overall, similar talent, I find it pretty hard to pick a Florida win at the moment. So unfortunately, I see a Texas A&M 27-20 win over the Gators. All right, to end this episode, let's catch back up. Focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard. Here we are back again. Focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard. And Alex, hey, we finally finally get to talk about a win. It's been a while since about mid-October last year. First of all, I don't care who it was. We can, of course, that plays into it, but it was good to finally see the team get a win.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it any way I can get it now. Obviously, Samford gave us a little bit of a scare last time they were here.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we looked prepared for this game, unlike the last one, and got out of the swamp with a victory. I'll take it.
Absolutely. Could you tell pregame the electricity around one DJ Lagway?
Oh man, I mean, any tunnel he was walking out of, any part of the crowd he was near, you heard people cheering for him and yelling his name, and clearly he mentioned in his post-game presser that, you know, he was nervous. He could feel the weight of that start on his shoulders, despite the opponent being one that, you know, most people might consider a cupcake. It's still a big moment for a young quarterback to come into a stadium with, I don't think there was a full 90,000 in there, but 80,000+ crowd. And
given the circumstances, a good crowd.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me, a great crowd given what I thought was going to happen. I mean, I thought that, we were going to see a lot of empty seats, and there really wasn't that many. But he knew it was a big moment. The crowd definitely didn't let him forget that. But yeah, lots of energy, lots of excitement around DJ when he was warming up, coming out of the tunnel. Every photographer was just huddled around him. So it was very exciting to see, very electrifying for sure.
Yeah. From your vantage point on the sideline, did it feel different? Like, I mean, pregame and during the game?
I mean, that energy stayed, and I'm sure, as I don't know if they showed it on the TV broadcast, but I mean, after his first touchdown, or I think it was his first touchdown to Tank Hawkins, I mean, people were just cheering. Like, the whole crowd was DJ Lagway, clap, 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 clap. I mean, everybody was cheering for him, and after every single touchdown thereon, it was like that. And even before the game started, people were cheering his name, like I said, and just really excited to see him on the field, regardless of the opponent.
And that's what I liked about it too. You mentioned the touchdown to Tank, and we're showing your great images too that you took Saturday night. Alex Shepard photography here. I mean, first drive of the game, Elijah Badger, and the big catch and run, the touchdown to Tank, the touchdown to Mizell. I mean, it was also look, that's what these games kind of provide for us, but still at the same time, Lagway getting a lot of guys involved, and not just involved, but some big plays from those guys.
Yeah, and sorry if my voice is a little bit scratchy today. It's still recovering. But I liked seeing him spread the ball around, and it was actually very special for him to get the ball to Tank, because he said that that's like his guy. That's one of his best friends on the team. And you could see that. There's the photo. And I
try and produce along the way.
Oh no,
I'll get lucky sometimes.
No, you did a great job. For this one, I mean, obviously it was a long touchdown, but as soon as the ball was entering Tank's hands, you could see, if you were watching DJ, he was taking off, sprinting for the end zone to try and go celebrate with him. That didn't happen a few of the other times, but this was a really special moment for the two of them. And obviously, I think most of us hope that there's more of this to come. I think they need to get Tank more involved, given his speed.
Yeah.
He and Trey Wilson could pose a huge threat to defenses if they just mix them up and do exactly what they did on Saturday.
Yeah, I know some of your favorite string of images that you shared on Twitter was this deep one to Aiden Mizell. Just a crazy throw. I mean, you see Lagway step up in the pocket, not looking to run, but looking to launch one, and boy, does he ever! He feet gets taken off the ground because he's throwing the ball so hard, and just right in the bread basket right there for Aiden Mizell.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching him, because I told you in our first episode, I typically watch the quarterback's eyes and just see what they're doing. I mean, I thought it was a busted play. I didn't even see Mizell out of the corner of my eye. My favorite part of this image is Albert covering his eyes behind. Like, I think that was all of us for a few moments in the game, just scared about, what was going to happen. But I mean, he put it right on the money. The defender, I didn't catch it in the image, or in one of the ones I posted, but the defender actually got a hand on the ball and it grazed his finger. So it was very close to not being completed. But fortunately, Mizell was locked in, brought it down, and got his first career touchdown as well. So very exciting for a lot of Gators.
Yeah, as we said, and just, I mean, the explosiveness, not just getting new guys involved, but getting new guys involved in a big way. It wasn't just dink and dunk. It wasn't, conservative call. It was just like, hey, if your name's going to be called on the receiving end of a play, it's probably going to be a big play. So that was I think something I liked about it too. Going on, and I'm going to try and get to the images here. Do you have a story about Lagway and the offensive lineman asking him up to sing at the alma mater? I thought that was the story that I heard too. Is like, hey, they brought him up there to get that done.
Oh yeah, I think that they knew exactly what they were doing. For whatever reason it may be, I think they wanted him front row because he deserved the credit. He was very humble in victory, saying it was, his receivers and his linemen, but the linemen, they know what the crowd wants. They know that everyone's cheering his name. They want to see him. And then on top of that, I was actually one of the last photographers to make it to the front. And I had seen him toward the back originally. And so I was looking down the lines of guys with their arms around going, where the heck is he? And then I took a peek around the front and I saw, 50 photographers crunched up there. I was like, I guarantee you he's up there. And so I came around the front and fortunately a spot opened up and sure enough, he was up there swaying around. And then, as you can see, I mean, everyone was just really happy. He was happy. And then after we sang the alma mater and the fight song, Austin Barber covered him up, as well as I think 2 or 3 other offensive linemen like Jake Slaughter surrounded him. We're like, all right, no more pictures. Everyone step back, like Mr. President, please. So it was cool to see that camaraderie with him and his teammates.
Yeah. So we do eventually have another game to be played. Are you, Gator fan Alex Shepard, and you ready to turn the page to DJ Lagway beating the starting quarterback against Texas A&M?
I might surprise some people, but no.
Okay.
I think he's got immense talent. I just, I think that Mertz earned the starting job for a reason. He has, done a good job leading this team. And I think that we need to see a healthy mix of both. I don't think that we need to just say, oh, well, Mertz, thanks. See you later. Appreciate what you've done, but Lagway had a good game against an FCS team and we need to put him out there. Mertz has the experience. He's played against SEC teams. And I think what you need to do, if it were me, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to throw Lagway out there and say, go get him, kid, in your second career start against an SEC opponent. And maybe it goes really well. But if it were me and I were the coach, I would be putting Mertz out there as the starter. And then I would have multiple packages for Lagway, whether it's every drive or like every other drive. I would not do a split series type of deal where you have Mertz in one and then Lagway another. I think it just makes sense to have Mertz out there and then bring Lagway in for a lot of packages and have him very involved. So I would personally not start him. I mean, I get that people want that given what happened and that he's obviously immensely talented. If Mertz doesn't come out of protocol, I think that, it'll certainly present more of a challenge than Samford did. But yeah, if it were me, I'm starting Mertz, bringing in Lagway in a lot of packages and having him involved.
Would your leash for Mertz be shorter?
Of course. Yeah. I don't think that you can go into that game and say, regardless of how the game's going, I'm going to keep Mertz in the game. Graham has been an outstanding leader for this team, both on and off the field. I think that deserves some, credit and that he deserves to be the starter if he's ready. But if we're getting into this game, we're down, 14-0 and he's not completing passes like he should. I think that gives you reason to say, well, let's see what DJ's got. But, obviously, I think that we did something similar with like Felipe Franks. I'm trying to think back on when we did this, but we had a highly touted freshman, and we were like, everyone wanted him in the game, and they get in the game, and they're not killing it. They're not doing any better than the previous quarterback, and you also don't want to spoil, a season where Mertz could have been performing better, but you just wanted to go behind the hype train of Lagway because the fans wanted it. So, I don't know a nicer way to say that, but
no. I mean, it is a tricky situation because, I mean, say you do start Mertz and it doesn't go and you do replace him like you said, and then Lagway does show out and you lose by a touchdown. You're like, well, if you would have started him, then maybe it wouldn't have been that way. Or, you throw Lagway out there and it doesn't go that way, but is that a buffer for Billy Napier saying, well, we decided to turn the page to the true freshman. There's going to be some bumps in the road playing a true freshman. So that kind of does, take us to this Saturday, starting or not. Who doesn't matter who starts at quarterback. I mean, almost a must win this Aggies game because of what happened a couple weeks ago against Miami.
Yeah, I mean, looking forward, I think this is one of the more winnable games.
Yep.
Texas A&M is not a great throwing team. They like to run the ball. Connor Wigman against Notre Dame, I can't remember off the top of my head, it was something like 12 of 30 passing with 2 interceptions.
He gets a lot of hype too.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And we haven't seen it. Like I bought into Aggies hype, not necessarily Wegman hype. I bought into Aggies hype coming into the season, but yeah, he was always just under the radar. Watch out for this guy type of quarterback.
Yeah, and obviously they played McNeese State, I believe, this last weekend, and it was an easier opponent for them as well, and he did a lot better, as you would expect him to. But this could present a challenge. This will be an away game. This is their first of the season. I think that we'll have another good crowd on Saturday. And hopefully we can make some kind of difference, for him. And maybe he'll put on another performance like, a 12 and 30 for 112-yard performance. He has talent. There's no doubt about that. Kind of similar to Cam Ward. Like when I had spoken about Cam Ward on the first podcast, that his worst game was against UCLA and on the, a bigger stage. And then obviously he came in here and, did a better job. I think that Cam Ward's a better quarterback, but ultimately we need to affect the quarterback. The defensive line needs to start showing up.
Yeah.
I don't think that they have really shown their true potential yet. They haven't really been able to affect the quarterback. Did they? I don't know if maybe they got like 1 sack or 2 sacks, something like that. Did they get one? I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, heck, I think it was 3 or 4 if I remember off the top of my head.
So see, this is where my brain is trying to remember. But against Miami, I'm not sure that they got.
Oh no.
Sorry, I should have specified.
Oh, my bad. Okay, I thought you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
They haven't really shown up in the big games as they should. They haven't been able to create that pressure, and obviously Texas A&M is going to have a similar, not as good, but a similar offensive line, defensive line combo. As Miami did, because they have recruited better than we have in the trenches, in my opinion. So
hey, look, that goes to the storyline I was going to ask you before we do wrap up here. That kind of goes to the quarterback storyline. Texas A&M's defensive line is really good, and I mean really good. And we've seen this Florida offensive line, especially against Miami a couple of weeks ago. I mean, does that play into the factor of hey pup? Yeah,
I got my 2 pups with me in here.
Yeah. Does that play into the factor of rolling with a DJ Lagway, just knowing, the ineffectiveness of this Florida offensive line so far?
Man, I think so. We've obviously seen that Mertz, has a tendency to be under pressure, and obviously has less escapability than someone like Lagway does. Lagway can make moves outside the pocket and get away. So I think that helps him. But at the same time, you also want to protect, your true freshman quarterback. And I think that's why it makes sense to play them both, to have Lagway come in and, they don't know if he's going to throw or if he's going to run. A lot like 2006 Florida, when you had Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. Chris Leak was the prolific passer, and Tebow could pass, but also was a great runner. I think Lagway is a great passer as well. But you're going to see a lot more pressure from the Texas A&M front seven, and especially their defensive line, than you would from a Samford. And so, I think that that's going to be a tough challenge for Florida's offensive line. I think that they really need to continue progressing upward. I think that Austin Barber has played great, but the rest
with the limited snaps he's been out there,
when he's actually out there. But it remains to be seen. This is going to be Florida's first SEC challenge. Will they be able to step up, come out of there 2-1? I think that if they do, I think you see a lot of Florida fans more hopeful for the season. I'll definitely have to update my outlook if we can win that game. But right now I'm hesitant just because I feel like the sample size is not yet large enough to make a full determination.
Absolutely hard to get a feel. Need a lot more data points, for lack of a better term, I guess, with these games coming up. So, all right, Alex, I know you got a busy week. Be back in town, Florida, Texas A&M. What you got? I guess coming up. Everybody knows about getting those photos done. Showed the great photos you got there Saturday night in the swamp. Anything going on crazy in the real estate world here in Northeast Florida?
Oh, I mean, right now, the market's actually seeing a little bit of a shift favoring buyers, which is a great thing because for the last, 2 years, it's been focused on the seller side of things. So a lot of first-time home buyers coming into the market. Interest rates are starting to trickle down, which is always a good sign for the home market. So if anyone's looking to move to Jacksonville, come hang out with us, Dave, over here in the bold new city of the South. We'd love to have them over here.
Absolutely. So photos, if you're looking to move to Jacksonville, all that stuff right here in this area, make sure contact Alex Shepard. This has been another edition of Focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard. All right, good stuff from Alex, and of course, good stuff earlier from Robert giving us a preview of Texas A&M. That would do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.